My mother looked me in the eyes, in front of a room full of people who were supposed to love me, and called me a disgrace to our family's legacy. So I called my lawyer and had myself legally erased from it. The next morning, the famous food critic they'd flown in to save their restaurant didn't call them. He called me. My name is Clara. I'm 32, and for the last 4 years, I've been the head chef and owner of Aperture, a small, brutally honest restaurant in Chicago that somehow earned a Michelin star. My life is a carefully plated symphony of controlled chaos, precise temperatures, and the relentless pursuit of an idea on a plate. It's a world away from where I grew up. The Corner Booth, my family's diner in a forgotten corner of Ohio, a place that smelled permanently of stale coffee and deep-fried nostalgia. My legacy, according to my mother, was supposed to be lukewarm chili and pancakes that all tasted vaguely of the same griddle. My success to her wasn't a source of pride. It was a betrayal. I hadn't been home in 2 years, not for lack of trying, but because every phone call home felt less like a conversation and more like a consultation I wasn't getting paid for. My older brother, Leo, who had inherited my father's name, but none of his talent, was running the diner into the ground. My mother, Eleanor, was the queen of passive-aggressive martyrdom. Every call was the same script. "Clara, dear, Leo's trying a new supplier for the ground beef. What do you think about the fat-to-lean ratio?" Or, "The health inspector mentioned something about our refrigeration temps. You deal with that fancy equipment. What's a safe zone?" I was their free consultant, their culinary Google, the daughter whose name they'd dropped to impress suppliers, but whose actual food they considered too fussy. Still, a part of me, the stupid, hopeful part that remembered my dad letting me stir the gravy when I was 6, kept the line open. I'd send them money when they claimed a fryer broke. I'd walk Leo through a basic bechamel sauce over FaceTime while my own service was in full swing. I did it because I thought that's what you do. You show up, even when they make it clear they only want a piece of you, not the whole person. Then came the big one, the email from my mother with the subject line, "A celebration of 50 years." The Corner Booth was hitting its golden anniversary, and they were planning a huge revival event. It was less a celebration and more a desperate, last-ditch effort to save the business from bankruptcy. The email was a masterclass in emotional manipulation. It spoke of my late father's dream, of community, of legacy. It ended with a hook she knew I couldn't resist. "We need you, Clara. Not just your advice. We need your name. We need your food. Come home and cook for this one night. Show this town what a real Morgan can do." Against every rational instinct, against the advice of my business partner, my therapist, and my own exhausted soul, I said yes. I saw it as a peace offering, a chance to finally bridge the gap between their world and mine. I told myself that if I could just show them, on their own turf, what I was capable of, they would finally see me. Not the disobedient daughter who left, but the chef I had become. I spent the next month designing a menu that was a love letter to my roots. I took the humble ingredients of the diner, potatoes, onions, chuck roast, and elevated them. Miniature shepherd's pies with a parsnip puree topping, deconstructed Reuben sandwiches on rye crisps, a sophisticated coffee and donuts dessert. It was my soul on a platter, a bridge between the corner booth and aperture. I poured my heart, my Michelin-starred expertise, and thousands of dollars of my own money into sourcing the ingredients and prepping what I could in advance. I was coming home to save them. I just didn't realize they had no intention of being saved by me. The simmering resentment in my family home wasn't a secret. It was the climate. It was the humidity in the air, the unspoken draft under every door. Arriving back in my hometown felt like putting on a wool coat that was 2 sizes too small. The town was the same, but I was different, and that difference was an offense. The moment I walked into the corner booth, the tension was thick enough to be a side dish. Leo, my brother, stood behind the counter with a dish rag in his hand and a sneer on his face. He'd gained weight, and the white apron strained against his middle. "Look what the cat dragged in," he said, not even making eye contact. "The big city chef is here to grace us with her presence." My mother, Eleanor, rushed out from the back, wiping her hands on her apron. Her hug was brittle, all bone and performance. "Clara, darling, we were so worried you'd miss your flight. Everyone is so excited." Everyone, I knew, meant the bank manager and the food critic from the state paper they'd managed to lure with the promise of my name. She surveyed my luggage, which included a state-of-the-art immersion circulator and my own knife roll. My, all those fancy gadgets. Your father could do more with a spoon and a prayer. The next 4 days were a slow-motion descent into hell. The kitchen I remembered from my childhood was now a health inspector's nightmare. The walk-in fridge had a faint sour smell, and Leo's organizational system seemed to be based on whatever he touched last. He questioned every technique I used. "Why are you searing the short ribs before you braise them? Dad always just threw them in the pot." He'd accidentally turn up the heat on a delicate sauce, or forget to order the microgreens I needed for garnish. It was sabotage by 1,000 tiny cuts, all delivered with a shrug and a muttered, "Sorry, that's not how we do things here." My mother was the conductor of this orchestra of incompetence. She'd watch me work for hours, a small pained smile on her face. "It's wonderful, dear, truly," she'd say as I plated a test dish. "But it's just a lot, don't you think? Our customers are simple people." She would undermine my authority with the part-time staff they'd hired, telling them to ignore my instructions and chop the onions coarsely instead of the fine brunoise I'd asked for. "It's more rustic that way," she'd explain, looking at me as if I were the one who didn't understand. I pushed through. I worked 18-hour days, fueled by coffee and a desperate need to prove them wrong. I cleaned the kitchen, top to bottom. I prepped every component of my menu with painstaking precision. I was a machine, running on the fumes of my own professionalism. I told myself it was just their fear talking. They were scared of failing, and they were taking it out on me. I refused to see it for what it was, a deep, abiding resentment of my success. They didn't want me to elevate them. They wanted me to sink back down to their level. The night of the 50th anniversary event, I felt a flicker of hope. The dining room was decorated with sad-looking balloons and streamers. The tables were set. I had my stations organized, my components ready. Service was in an hour. I felt that familiar pre-service hum, the adrenaline that meant it was showtime. I walked out of the kitchen to check the dining room one last time, my crisp white chef's coat feeling like armor. And that's when I saw it. The long buffet tables, where my elegant bite-sized creations were supposed to be, were instead laden with giant, steaming chafing dishes. In them, sloshing around under the heat lamps, was my family's legacy. Greasy chili dogs floating in watery sauce, a mountain of limp French fries, a vat of the bland, gluey mac and cheese that Leo called his signature. My food, my carefully crafted menu, was nowhere in sight. I turned and saw my mother and Leo standing by the kitchen door, watching me. Leo looked triumphant. My mother's face was arranged in an expression of gentle pity. "What is this?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "We had a little chat," my mother said, stepping forward and smoothing a wrinkle in the paper tablecloth. "And we decided to stick with what people know and love. The classics." "The classics?" I repeated, the words tasting like ash. "Where is my food?" "Oh, it's in the walk-in, dear," she said brightly. "Leo said we can probably use it for staff meals for the next week. Waste not, want not." I stared at her, the room tilting slightly. The curated guest list, the food critic, the mayor, they were all arriving, expecting the Michelin-starred chef's menu that was promised on the invitation. They were getting chili dogs. "You used my name," I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. "You used my name to get them in the door, and then you served them this?" Leo scoffed. "Our food was good enough for 50 years. It's good enough now. Sorry if it's not fancy enough for you." But it was my mother's words that broke me. She stepped closer and put a hand on my arm. Her voice was syrupy with fake concern. "Clara, please don't make a scene. Your food is lovely, a wonderful hobby. But this diner, our legacy, it's about real, honest food for real people. You've been gone so long, you've forgotten that. What you do, it's a performance. This," she said, gesturing to the vat of chili, "is family." She then looked me dead in the eye, her expression hardening just enough for me to see the truth. "To be honest, your menu was a disgrace to your father's memory. He built this place on simplicity, not arrogance." "A disgrace." The word echoed in the sudden ringing silence of my mind. It wasn't an insult. It was a diagnosis. It was the final definitive statement on my place in this family. I wasn't their daughter. I was a brand they could leverage, a tool they could use, and a failure when I refused to be what they wanted. In that moment, something inside me didn't break. It snapped. A clean, cold, perfect snap. It was the sound of a chain breaking. I looked at my mother's face, at my brother's smug expression, at the pathetic buffet of their failure, and I felt nothing but a profound, chilling clarity. I didn't say a word. I simply turned, walked back into the kitchen, and took off my chef's coat. I folded it neatly and placed it on the counter. Then I went upstairs to the small, dusty room they still called mine, packed my knife roll and my bag, and walked out the back door of the diner. I didn't look back. I called a cab from the corner, and by the time the first guests were tasting Leo's watery chili, I was checking into a sterile, anonymous hotel room, miles away. The real service was about to begin. I'd like to say my first instinct was righteous anger, a volcanic eruption of fury. But it wasn't. It was silence. A deep, hollow silence in my chest where years of desperate hope used to be. I sat on the edge of the stiff hotel bed, the hum of the ice machine in the hallway, the only sound. For a long time, I just stared at the floral patterned wallpaper, tracing the repeating design with my eyes. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot flush on my skin. They hadn't just rejected my food. They had staged a public execution of my identity, using my own name as the bait. They had told the world I was a fraud, that the food on their buffet was my food, and then the silence was replaced by a cold, sharp focus. It was the same feeling I get just before a chaotic dinner service, when the tickets are flooding in, and the only way through is with absolute precision. No emotion. Just action. I pulled out my laptop and my phone. My hands were perfectly steady. My first call was to my publicist in Chicago, a sharp woman named Dana, who had a shark's instinct for reputation management. It was late, but she picked up on the second ring. "Clara? What's wrong?" "I've been getting weird pings about some anniversary party. They're not serving my food, Dana," I said, my voice flat and even. "They used my name on the invitation, but they've put out the diner's old menu. They're passing it off as mine." There was a pause, and then I heard the rapid clicking of a keyboard. "Oh, no, they did not," she breathed. "The critic from the State Journal is there. I confirmed it myself." "I know," I said. "I need you to draft a statement. Effective immediately. I am formally severing all personal and professional ties with the Corner Booth Diner and its proprietors, Eleanor and Leo Morgan. State that the menu being served at tonight's event was not designed or executed by me, and its promotion using my name constitutes a fraudulent misrepresentation of my brand." "Consider it done," Dana said, her voice now like steel. "I'll have it on the wire services in 20 minutes. I'll also send a direct private message to the critic. What's his name again?" "Robert Finlay," I said. "Tell him I'll be available to speak with him tomorrow morning, and that I'll be happy to provide the original menu I designed as proof." "Clara," Dana said, a hint of concern in her voice. "Are you sure? This is scorched earth. They lit the match, Dana. I'm just redirecting the flames." My second call was to my lawyer. I explained the situation. The unauthorized use of my name for commercial gain, the potential damage to my professional reputation. He was, to put it mildly, delighted. He spoke of cease and desist letters and potential damages with the enthusiasm of a kid on Christmas morning. By the time I hung up, a legal firewall was being constructed around my name, my brand, and my restaurant. Finally, I opened my laptop and composed an email to my mother and brother. It was short, devoid of emotion, and final. Subject: regarding the corner booth. Eleanor and Leo. This email is to formally notify you that I am revoking all permission, indefinitely, for you to use my name, my likeness, or my professional credentials in any association with your business. A formal cease and desist is being delivered by my legal counsel. Any further attempts to link my name to your establishment will be met with legal action. My publicist has issued a statement clarifying that I had no involvement in the menu served at tonight's event. All personal effects of mine remaining at the house can be disposed of as you see fit. Do not contact me again. Clara. I hit send. And for the first time in my life, I felt the exquisite relief of hanging up on my own family. I turned off my phone, unplugged the hotel landline, and slept for 10 hours. A deep, dreamless sleep. I had spent my entire life trying to earn a seat at the table. That night, I finally realized I needed to build my own. I never really felt like a child. Not in the carefree, scraped knees and ice cream way. I was more like a small, perpetually undervalued employee. The corner booth wasn't just my home. It was my first job, my training ground, and my prison. My memories are a slideshow of sensory details. The feel of damp flour on my hands before dawn, the metallic clang of pots in the industrial sink, the smell of burnt bacon fat that clung to my hair and clothes. My father, Frank, was the heart of the place. He was a big, quiet man who communicated through food. A perfectly flipped pancake was his good morning. An extra scoop of ice cream on my pie was his I'm proud of you. He saw something in me. When I was 8, he lifted me onto a milk crate so I could reach the stove and taught me how to make a proper omelet. "It's all in the wrist, kiddo," he'd say. "Don't fight it. Let the heat do the work." He saw my passion not as a hobby, but as a continuation of himself. Leo, who was 2 years older, had no interest and no talent. He was clumsy in the kitchen, always burning himself or dropping things. He preferred sitting out front, charming the old ladies and pocketing tips. My dad tried to teach him, but Leo would get frustrated and storm off. I was the one who stayed. I was the one who learned the recipes, who understood the rhythm of the kitchen, who could taste a sauce and know instantly it needed a pinch more salt or a splash of vinegar. My mother, Eleanor, saw this dynamic and interpreted it through her own warped lens. To her, Leo's lack of interest was a sign of his management potential. "He's a people person," she'd say. "He's meant for the front of the house." My talent, however, was treated as a useful, if slightly strange, utility. It was a skill, like being good at plumbing. When the dishwasher broke, you called a plumber. When a catering order for the Rotary Club came in, you tasked Clara. I was never praised for my creativity, only for my efficiency. When I was 14, I entered a local baking competition. I spent a week perfecting a lemon meringue pie with a lavender-infused crust. It was delicate, complex, and completely my own creation. I won first place. The local paper took a picture. When the article came out, my mother had been quoted extensively. "It's an old family recipe," she told the reporter. "Passed down through generations. I'm just so glad Clara has the family touch." She'd taken my first real achievement and absorbed it into her narrative, erasing my contribution completely. When I tried to object, she simply patted my cheek and said, "Don't be silly, dear. It's for the diner. We're a team." The real shift happened when my father got sick. A sudden, aggressive cancer that took him from us in 6 months. His last coherent conversation with me was in the hospital. He grabbed my hand, his grip surprisingly strong. "Don't let them hold you back, Clara," he whispered, his voice raspy. "Your palate is bigger than this town. Go, make something beautiful." He died a week later. I was 17. His death left a power vacuum that my mother and Leo eagerly filled. They decided I would defer college to help out at the diner. It wasn't a request. My dream of going to culinary school was dismissed as a frivolous expense. "Everything you need to know, you can learn right here," my mother said, as if comparing a Michelin-starred education to frying frozen onion rings. The next few years were suffocating. Leo was officially the manager, and he ran the place with a kind of lazy arrogance. He'd change suppliers to save a few cents, sacrificing quality. He'd cut corners on cleaning. I was the silent workhorse in the back, trying to maintain my father's standards, constantly fighting a losing battle. My suggestions for new menu items were shot down as too risky. My attempts to introduce fresh local ingredients were too expensive. I was trapped, watching my father's legacy being tarnished by mediocrity and neglect. My one lifeline was Mr. Chen. He ran a small, impeccable Chinese restaurant on the other side of town. He'd been friends with my father, another lifer, in the brutal restaurant business. He would come into the diner for coffee sometimes, and watch me work. One day, he saw me deboning a chicken with a speed and precision that was second nature to me. He just nodded and said, "That is a skill, a gift." He started lending me his cookbooks, Escoffier, Bocuse, Thomas Keller. He talked to me about techniques I'd only dreamed of. He was the only person who spoke my language. He was the one who told me about a scholarship to the Culinary Institute of America. "You must apply," he urged. "This is not your cage." I worked on the application in secret, late at night in my room. When I won a partial scholarship, I knew it was my only chance. I told my mother and Leo I was leaving. The scene was uglier than I could have imagined. Leo accused me of abandoning them, of thinking I was better than them. My mother cried, but her tears weren't of sadness. They were of anger. "Your father would be so disappointed," she said, the cruelest word she could conjure. "Leaving your family when they need you most." I left anyway. It felt like tearing off a limb, but I knew if I stayed, I would rot. And for the next decade, I worked. I clawed my way through culinary school, worked unpaid internships in brutal kitchens, rose through the ranks from line cook to sous chef, to finally, miraculously, opening my own place. And through all of it, a part of me still sought their approval. I'd send them articles written about me, pictures of my food. The responses were always lukewarm. "That's nice, dear." But the calls for advice, and eventually for money, never stopped. I was the family's ATM and its encyclopedia, but I was never just their daughter. Not until I finally hung up the phone. The morning after the party, I woke up feeling strangely calm. I ordered coffee and a newspaper from room service. The fallout had been swift and brutal. My publicist's statement was everywhere. On my phone, which I had dared to turn back on, there were 37 missed calls from my mother and Leo, and a string of increasingly frantic and abusive text messages. They ranged from pleading, "Clara, please call us. This is all a misunderstanding," to furious, "How dare you humiliate us like this, you ungrateful child," to outright threats, "You'll regret this. You're ruining the family." I read them all with a strange sense of detachment, as if reading about characters in a poorly written novel. Then I deleted the entire thread and blocked their numbers. Around 10 a.m., a call came in from a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated, then answered. "Clara Morgan speaking." "Ms. Morgan, it's Robert Finlay from the State Journal." His voice was tired, but professional. "I owe you an apology and an explanation." I sat up straighter. "Go on." "I was at your family's diner last night," he said. "The food was, to put it politely, an abomination. I was preparing to write the most scathing review of my career, one that would have your name attached to it. Then, around 9 p.m., my editor forwarded me your publicist's statement. It changed everything." He paused. "I just got off the phone with your brother. He alternated between calling you a liar and a saboteur. Your mother got on the line and cried for 10 minutes. I imagine she did, I said dryly. Look, he said, I'm a food critic, not a family counselor, but I'm also a journalist. And this is a much more interesting story now. The prodigal daughter, the Michelin star, the family diner, the public betrayal. My editor has cleared the front page of the lifestyle section. The story is no longer about bad chili dogs. It's about you. He asked if I would go on the record. He asked for the menu I had designed. I emailed it to him while we were still on the phone. Before we hung up, he said something that stuck with me. For what it's worth, Ms. Morgan, your menu sounds incredible. This town has no idea what it just missed. I knew I couldn't stay in that hotel room. I couldn't go back to Chicago yet either. I felt unmoored. I needed to see one person. I rented a car and drove to the other side of town, pulling up in front of Chen's Garden, Mr. Chen's restaurant. The lights were off and a closed sign hung in the window. My heart sank. Then I saw a faint light on in the apartment upstairs where he lived. I rang the bell. A few moments later, the door opened. Mr. Chen looked older, his hair thinner and grayer, but his eyes were the same, sharp, intelligent, and kind. He broke into a wide smile. Clara, I was wondering when I would hear from you. He ushered me in, his small apartment smelling of ginger and tea. He had already seen the news online. He poured me a cup of jasmine tea, his hands steady. They are fools, your family, he said simply, sitting across from me at his small kitchen table. They were given a treasure, and they tried to trade it for pennies. We sat for hours, and I told him everything. The whole story, from the moment I arrived to the final, devastating insult. He listened without interruption, just nodding occasionally. When I finished, he was silent for a long time. Then he leaned forward. Legacy, he said, his voice quiet but firm. Your mother speaks of legacy. She thinks it is a building, a name on a sign. She is wrong. Legacy is not a thing you own. It is a thing you build. It is the skill in your hands, the integrity in your heart, the respect you earn. Your father understood this. They have forgotten. He looked at me, his gaze intense. So the question is, what will you build now? Just then his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, and a small ironic smile played on his lips. It appears your mother is looking for allies, he said, showing me the screen. It was a text from Eleanor. Mr. Chen, I know you are Frank's friend. My daughter has done a terrible thing to us. She is trying to ruin our family. I hope you will not believe her lies. Mr. Chen looked at me, then back at his phone. He slowly typed a reply. Eleanor, I have known Clara since she was a girl. I know her heart, and I know her skill. The only lies I see are the ones you tell yourself. He hit send and put the phone face down on the table. Some fires, he said, are best left to burn out on their own. That afternoon, sitting in his quiet, peaceful kitchen, I finally felt like I was home. The confrontation, when it came, wasn't in a sterile lawyer's office or a screaming match over the phone. It was on my terms. 2 days after the disastrous party, I got a registered letter delivered to Mr. Chen's address, where I'd been staying. It was from a local lawyer, formally requesting a meeting on behalf of my mother and brother to discuss an amicable resolution. They wanted to negotiate. They thought this was a problem that could be solved with a contract and a gag order. I agreed to the meeting, but not at their lawyer's office. I chose the location, the now empty dining room of the corner booth. I wanted them to be surrounded by the scene of their crime, by the faded wallpaper and the sticky Formica tabletops that represented the legacy they held so dear. I also told them I would be bringing my own counsel. They probably expected a shark in a suit from Chicago. They weren't prepared for Mr. Chen. I arrived first, letting myself in with the old key I still had. The diner was dark and smelled of stale beer and defeat. The pathetic party decorations were still up, sagging and sad. I stood in the middle of the room, the silence a stark contrast to the noise in my head. A few minutes later, Mr. Chen arrived, not in a suit, but in his simple, clean chef's whites. He carried a small leather-bound folder. My mother and brother arrived exactly on time. Their lawyer, a portly local man named Henderson, trailing behind them. Eleanor's eyes were red and puffy, a performance of victimhood. Leo just looked sullen, his arms crossed over his chest like a defiant teenager. "Clara," my mother began, her voice trembling. "What you did was cruel, unforgivable. You aired our private business to the world." "Private business?" I countered, my voice echoing slightly in the empty room. "You put my name on a public invitation and tried to pass off Leo's slop as my cooking. You made it public. I just told the truth." Leo lunged forward. "You ruined us! The phone hasn't stopped ringing. People are canceling reservations they've had for years. Finley's review came out this morning. He called us a culinary tragedy and a case study in deception. He called you a victim of familial fraud." "And was he wrong?" I asked, my gaze steady. "This is not productive." Henderson, their lawyer, interjected, adjusting his tie. "We are here to find a way forward. My clients are prepared to offer a public apology in exchange for you retracting your statement and agreeing to help them transition the business." I almost laughed. "Transition? You mean bail you out again? Let me be perfectly clear. There is no us. There is no forward. The only thing I want from you is to never see or speak to you again." "You can't do that," Eleanor wailed. "We're family." "No," a calm voice said from the doorway. We all turned. Mr. Chen stepped forward, holding the leather folder. "Family does not do this. I was Frank's friend for 30 years. I watched him build this place with his bare hands, and I watched him nurture his daughter's gift. A gift you saw as a threat and a tool." He looked at my mother. "He told me many times that Clara was the future, that her talent would take this place to new heights. But you didn't want new heights. You wanted a comfortable cage." He then turned to Leo. "And you were jealous. You knew you couldn't hold a candle to her, so you tried to snuff hers out." He walked to the center of the room and placed the folder on one of the tables. He opened it. "Frank was a smart man. After he got his diagnosis, he knew you would try to trap her here. So he came to me. He amended his will. He didn't tell you because he knew you would make Clara's life hell." Henderson stepped forward, looking alarmed. "What is this?" Mr. Chen slid a document across the table. It was my father's signature, clear as day, on a notarized codicil to his will. "Frank left the business, the building, and the name to Eleanor and Leo," Mr. Chen explained. "But he left one other thing. He was the sole owner of the land the diner sits on, and he left that in its entirety to Clara. In his words," Mr. Chen read from the document, "so she will always have a place to build her own table, even if she has to tear down the old one first. The silence in the room was absolute. My mother's face went from white to gray. Leo looked like he couldn't breathe. Their diner, their legacy, was sitting on my land. I was their landlord. Henderson cleared his throat, shuffling papers. This is highly irregular. It is perfectly legal, Mr. Chen said, and effective upon Clara's 30th birthday, which was 2 years ago. She has been your landlord all this time and never knew it. I stared at the document, my vision blurring. My father. He had seen it all coming. He had given me the one thing he knew I would need. An escape hatch. A final act of protection from beyond the grave. I looked up at my mother and brother, seeing them clearly for the first time. They weren't monsters. They were just small, scared people, terrified of being eclipsed. So, I said, my voice finding a strength I didn't know I possessed. Let's talk about the new lease terms. Or perhaps the eviction notice. The fallout was less of a bang and more of a slow, painful crumble. They couldn't afford to buy the land from me, and no bank would give them a loan. Not with the diner's reputation in tatters. They couldn't afford the new market-rate lease I offered them. They tried to fight it, of course. Their lawyer made threats about contesting the will, but my father and Mr. Chen had made it ironclad. There were no loopholes. Within 3 months, a for sale sign was staked into the sad patch of grass out front of the corner booth. They sold the business name and the worn-out equipment for a fraction of what it was worth. The last I heard, Leo was working as a line cook at a chain restaurant 2 towns over, and my mother had moved in with her sister. They were ghosts in a town that had once been their kingdom. I never spoke to them again. There was nothing left to say. I didn't tear the diner down. For a while, I didn't do anything. I went back to Chicago, to the controlled, beautiful chaos of Aperture. But something had shifted in me. My father's final gift wasn't just land. It was a choice. It was a question. What will you build now, 6 months later? I found the answer. I temporarily closed Aperture, leaving it in the capable hands of my sous chef. I went back home. I stood in the empty shell of the corner booth and felt not bitterness, but potential. I hired a crew. We gutted the place, tore out the greasy vinyl booths and the cracked formica. We exposed the old brick walls my father had laid. We installed a new state-of-the-art open kitchen, right in the center of the dining room. A year after the worst night of my life, I held a new grand opening. The sign out front didn't say the corner booth. It said Frank's. The menu wasn't fussy or pretentious. It was a tribute. It was elevated diner food, made with local ingredients and the techniques I had mastered. It was my father's simple omelette, made with farm-fresh eggs and Gruyere. It was his short rib recipe, but braised for 72 hours until it melted. It was my lemon meringue pie with the lavender crust. The opening night was packed. Robert Finley, the critic, was there. He wrote a review titled, "A Legacy Reborn." But the most important guest sat at a small table near the kitchen. Mr. Chen, sipping a cup of tea, watched me command my new kitchen, my new home. He caught my eye across the busy room and simply nodded, a small, proud smile on his face. In that moment, surrounded by the warmth and noise and beautiful food, I finally understood. Legacy isn't something you inherit in a will or a building you're given. It's not about blood. It's about passion. It's about the standards you hold yourself to when no one is watching. My mother and brother thought legacy was about clinging to the past, about owning a name. They were wrong. Real legacy is about building a future worthy of the best parts of what came before. They tried to erase me from their story, so I was forced to write my own. And it turned out to be a much, much better recipe. Thanks so much for listening to my story. It's still strange to talk about, but I feel like it's important to share. We often feel so trapped by the expectations of family, by the roles they assign us. But you are the author of your own story, the head chef of your own life. You get to decide what goes on the menu. I'm curious to hear what you all think. Do you believe in blood being thicker than water? Or have you had to create your own family? What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Let me know down in the comments. Your stories and your support mean the world. And if you'd like to hear more about finding your own way, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, cook with heart. Clara.